Some encounters leave marks on history. Others exist only in the memories of the people who lived through them. Tonight's investigation is not about folklore or fiction, but about 5 accounts told plainly by the people who experienced them. Stories that refuse to fit into any comfortable category. Stories that stretch across generations, landscapes, and types of phenomena. Human-shaped, animal-shaped, and shapes that should not exist at all. 5 stories submitted to 818 by Redditors themselves. No creepypastas or no sleeps. These tales of terror come straight from the source. We begin with a tale from Mississippi. A story passed through a family for almost a century, rooted in dirt roads, clotheslines, and a fear that never quite faded. Story 1. The Six-Toed Man of Kilmichael by Anonymous. The first story comes from a user whose grandmother lived to be 96. A lifetime long enough to let the truth settle and tall tales fade away. Her family lived on the outskirts of Kilmichael, Mississippi, poor and spread across several small homes in a cluster. They all knew the same mysterious figure. My mama passed away at the age of 96 in 2018. She and other family members had a story about a 6-toed mysterious man who lived in the woods. When Mama was a little girl, she lived in a small town called Kilmichael, Mississippi. Her family, poor, lived on the outskirts of town. Several extended family members lived in several houses clustered together. He would steal only women's clothes from the clotheslines to wear. He was fond of bonnets. They would find 6-toed footprints, and one foot had 6 toes. No one ever saw Nancy up close, but through glimpses they would see a large man in the woods wearing a woman's dress and bonnet. I have so many questions, but unfortunately I can no longer ask. Mama said anyone could go out into the yard and yell, "Nancy, throw me a rock," and a rock would come sailing from the woods and hit the house. The house was too far from the woods for a normal man to throw a rock, and the rocks were often big. Mama said her mother, my great-grandmother Sanders, told her while Grandma Sanders was washing dishes home alone, she heard someone come through the back door. All the men folk were out in the fields. She was frightened and wouldn't turn around. Grandma Sanders picked up my Mama up from the floor and sat her beside the sink. Nancy lumbered into the kitchen with Grandma Sanders, opened the icebox, took some stuff out, and left. He left muddy footprints, and of course one foot had 6 toes. Grandma Sanders never turned to look at him. Mama said she was too young to remember what she saw. Another relative was home at night with some little ones. She was ironing while the kids played around in the bedroom. She looked at the window screen and could see a darker face looking back. The house was old and built up on blocks. Whoever was looking in had to be very tall. She made the kids lay on the floor, flicked the lights off. I imagine it was a kerosene lamp and not electric, but not sure. She laid on the floor with them and could hear the man breathing through the window screen. The breathing was so loud, she decided it wasn't a man, but a horse that had come to the window. She still couldn't get up the courage to investigate. She and the kids laid on the floor until they fell asleep, and morning came. Of course, Nancy's distinctive 6-toe footprint was found outside the window. Other than stealing clothes off lines and occasional theft of food, he was considered harmless until he attacked an adult cousin of Momo's named Grover. Nancy seemed to follow Grover around. Grover could get Nancy to throw a rock from the woods no matter whose house he was at. One night, Grover was going down the way somewhere and Nancy attacked him. Nancy tore at his clothes and deeply scratched Grover all over. Momo said it looked like a bobcat got hold of Grover. In the dark and commotion, Grover never saw Nancy's face under the shadow of a bonnet. After Grover's attack, the men of the family decided they'd go hunt Nancy. They hunted into the hills and hollows but never found him. They did find a small cave that had lizards and other small creatures tied to sticks hanging from branches. I'm not sure what Momo meant by this. I imagine a dream catcher type thing, with lizards and small vermin woven into it. Momo's family moved away from Kilmichael not too much later, and no other interactions with Nancy took place. I have often wanted to go to Kilmichael to see if there are any historical records mentioning a six-toed cross-dressing Native American. I did write to a librarian that does historical research. She said that around that time, I guess early 1900s, that Native Americans were being moved out forcefully of this area. But it wasn't unusual for some to stay behind. My Momo wasn't the type to embellish or tell tales. I believe her accounts. Story 2. The Silent Deer Killer of Pennsylvania, by Anonymous. Our second story comes from the forests of northeast Pennsylvania. Two friends camping in the woods, a half moon, a dying fire, and something moving in the darkness just beyond human comfort. Watched something pull a deer carcass up a tree while camping. It was fairly dark and some distance away, but it looked like a 300-pound buck at least. Pretty huge. We were thinking a mountain lion or even a nimble black bear, but they're not known to carry kills up trees. I wish we had a spotlight handy, but from what we could see, didn't even appear to be a four-legged anything. It wasn't pulling it up the tree with its jaws, but whatever could have passed as arms or hands or something. What's worse is it was totally silent, other than the commotion noise. Deer was already dead, or was somehow silently killed. But whatever this thing was, it didn't make any noise of its own. Two of us didn't sleep after that, and yes, we were cracking predator jokes, but we were still actually kind of terrified. Deer was still up in the tree in the morning, so it was probably around 2 a.m, so definitely dark, but not too dark since it was a half moon. It wasn't pitch black, and you could see decently far into the woods around us from the moonlight. Foliage and canopy wasn't super dense either, where we were. We were just waiting for the fire to die down and then go to bed. We started to hear shuffling and commotion off in the distance, like twigs snapping, that sort of thing. We heard that off and on while we were there, pretty normal for camping. Well, it started to get much closer and sounded like something fairly big. It stopped after we got up to look, but couldn't see much. Then we heard shuffling and like something was hitting or dragging against a tree. So we were able to see antlers and the outline of a pretty big deer against a tree. I remember my buddy saying, "Holy, is that deer climbing the tree?" Then it just looked wrong. Like a deer cannot climb straight up a tree, yet somehow it was going up it. It was going up head first, like vertically looking up with its body against it. My other buddy goes, "No, wait, something's dragging it up." We ended up getting a bit closer, maybe 10 more feet. So at this point, we're about 50 yards away trying to get a look. And yeah, there was something pulling it up. We could see the brownish grey bits of fur on the deer in some spots, and we could tell it was dead. Just looked limp. And whatever was dragging it just looked super dark. We could see it because it was darker than the background, so kind of like a silhouette. Didn't see a maw, ears, anything like that an animal in the forest would have that could be doing this. I ended up pointing out it looked like it had two arms, one on the deer and the other on the tree. Didn't make a noise, no grunts or growls or anything. It was super weird and creepy. We were pretty freaked after that because we realized it wasn't anything we thought it was. The deer ended up on a branch maybe 30 foot up, kind of limp, just hanging there. Whatever the other thing was, we couldn't tell if it was still there with the deer or left, but we didn't hear anything for a while. My one buddy ended up sleeping, and me and the other stayed up. Deer was there in the morning. It looked like it had blood around the neck, but I can't be sure. There wasn't any on the ground beneath it or on the tree. It was super weird. Definitely won't forget it and still think about it on and off. It happened somewhat recently, only 2 years ago. Had the whole uncanny vibe to it, like we were witnessing something wrong or strange. Hard to describe. I kind of wish we had the balls to get closer and see what it was, because now I really want to know. But in the moment, there was no way it was happening. I really don't like to think about it. I really don't think it was a natural animal. It looked like it had arms. Story 3. The Crawler on Interstate 81 by Anonymous. The third encounter happened on Interstate 81 near Binghamton, New York. Late afternoon, decent visibility, routine traffic. And then something ahead in the median. Something moving towards oncoming cars. I've experienced my share of weird over the years, but the worst is the one I really try to remember. It was the late afternoon, driving on an interstate highway. In between the lanes, a distance ahead of my car, there was a thing ambling along towards oncoming traffic. It was maybe a foot high, and it looked like a head attached to arms or legs. All black skin. The face wasn't human, nor did it look like a recognizable animal. It had eyes and a mouth. Can't remember anything else except maybe some hair or fur sticking up on the head. The way it was moving was grotesque, like wagging its head back and forth as its mouth opened and closed constantly. I didn't want to look at first, as it looked so unnatural and creepy, but couldn't help but stare, even though I felt like I didn't want it to know I had seen it. Whatever it was seemed to be really there, as it was visible in the mirrors after passing by it. The backside revealed no further details, just the same arm, legs and head. Thankfully, I've never seen it again, and I have no idea what it even could have been. Some kind of spirit, maybe? This was seen in 2018 on Interstate 81, near Binghamton, New York. The head of this thing was humanoid in shape, and the eyes were larger than a human's would have been. I could see the whites of the eyes, and they had black or some kind of dark colour iris. I don't remember noticing any teeth, and what it was using to move, where it looked more like hands than feet. Story 4. The Wedding Dress Shop by Sagarian. Our next story isn't about obvious terror. It's about something far more mundane, and somehow a lot worse. A quiet street, a dead shop front, and a split-second moment that hit two people at the exact same time. No setup, no reason for anything strange to happen, and yet it did. This is what happened when a late-night walk took a turn at the window of the wedding dress shop. I was in my late teens when this happened. Back then, my best friend and I had a habit of exploring abandoned houses and creepy spots around our city. Most of the time it was just us goofing around, a flashlight, an adrenaline buzz, and the hope of seeing something weird. But this one time, it was different. Genuinely unsettling. We were walking through a part of the city that didn't have much going on at night. No crowds, no open shops, just silence. I think it was around 1 a.m. The year was probably 2016. We weren't even planning to explore anything that night. It was just a walk. That's when we passed this tiny store. I'd never really noticed it before. It was a small place with huge display windows, filled with mannequins dressed in wedding gowns. Kind of haunting, even before anything happened. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever seen anyone inside. No open sign, no one going in or out. Nobody ever talked about it. Just this eerie little wedding dress shop that always looked still. My friend and I glanced toward the shop at the same time, and then we froze. We both locked eyes for a second, not at the window, but at each other, and just ran. No words, no questions. We bolted in opposite directions like our lives depended on it. When I finally got home, out of breath and shaking, I checked my phone. He'd already messaged me. "Did you see it too?" Turns out we both caught the same glimpse. One of the mannequins had moved. We both saw its eyes turn towards us. Just a slight shift, enough to feel undeniably real. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me until I found out he'd seen the exact same thing. The same mannequin, the same movement. Ever since that night, I've had a weird fear of mannequins. Not the dramatic horror movie kind, more like a low-level unease that doesn't really go away. That moment, those eyes, are still burned into my memory. We told our other friends about it the next day. Of course they laughed, said we imagined it, or we were just tired, and maybe we were. But neither of us had ever run like that before, and we never went near that shop again. I'm 100% sure something happened there. We just don't know what. Story 5. The Diamonds in the Sky over Swansea Bay by Dice Mechanic. Our final story takes us to Swansea Bay in Wales. Close enough to home that it leaves an uncomfortable weight. Two separate witnesses, years apart, saw something on the shoreline that refuses to fit any known explanation. I've never seen a ghost or a spirit. No Bigfoots, no Thunderbirds. But I do have one really strange thing I've experienced. When I first got with my girlfriend, she told me about a weird incident she had on Swansea Bay, South Wales. She said she and a friend had seen a flock of strange shapes flying around the bay, just above the surface of the water. I went through all the obvious suggestions. Birds? No. Flying fish? No. Bird shadows? No. A complex kite casting reflections? No. She denied every possibility. We talked about it for a bit and moved on. I didn't think about her again for years. Then one day, I was down on the bay with a friend of mine. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. Swansea Bay has these large, double-height concrete stairs that run along the coastline for half a mile or so, like amphitheatre seating. We were sitting on them, chatting and looking out to sea, when my friend pointed towards the shallows and said, "What the f*** is that?" I followed her gaze and saw a formation of diamond-shaped objects, like the diamonds on playing cards, not gemstones. There were maybe 8 to 12 of them, each around a foot to a foot and a half across, maybe a little bigger. They were translucent black, like smoked glass. They flew in a grid-like formation, moving as one, with the occasional slide and shift as one swaps position with another, always maintaining that perfect tessellation. They moved fast and sporadically, almost mechanically, and I'd guess intelligently, zipping from one spot to another, stopping dead, hovering for a second, then shooting off again. While they were visible, they stayed anywhere from a couple of feet to just 6 inches above the surface. Every now and then, they'd merge with the water. No splash, no disturbance. Then re-emerge somewhere nearby. They zipped over areas where the surf was just an inch or two deep. And at one point they passed right next to a guy walking his dog at the water's edge. Neither the man nor the dog reacted at all. I have to assume they couldn't see them. The shapes never crossed onto the sand. They stayed strictly over the water. The whole thing lasted about 5 minutes before they all dipped into the surface and didn't come back. Every time I go down to the bay, still living in Swansea, I keep an eye out for them. It feels like a recurring phenomenon, and I've never heard of anything remotely similar. I still think about it a few times a week. 5 stories, separated by nearly a century, thousands of miles, and every possible environment. A 6-toed figure in Mississippi, a silent predator scaling trees in Pennsylvania, a crawling, head-shaped creature on a New York interstate, eyes watching from where they shouldn't, and geometric flying shapes above the waters in South Wales. None of them match each other, none of them fit any known category, none of them offer convenient explanations. What they do have in common is simple. Each witness describes what they saw plainly, without embellishment, without seeking attention, and without trying to make their encounter into anything more dramatic than it already was. Encounters that defy classification. Moments that feel like reality tearing at the seams. And stories that remain long after the people who lived them have moved on. Some phenomena stay unexplained. Not because there are no answers, but because the answers may not belong to any world we understand.
Kraken are the enormous bane of all deep-sea sailors. Although modern science believes that the gigantic squid is the inspiration for Kraken, they're sorely mistaken. Kraken, according to legend, dwarf even the greatest of whales, and the gigantic squid is proven to be dwarfed by the blue whale. Long before Tennyson wrote his poem on the beast, Annie correctly added the modifier "the." The Norse were familiar, indeed intimate, with this creature. The Eddas speak of many a sailor swept into the froth by the boat-splitting monster, whose tentacles were able to wrap around castles. Fortunately, birding Kraken is simpler than it seems. In short surface first before injecting it with a massive dose of tetrodotoxin, a poison found in the Japanese blowfish. As Kraken are native to the North Atlantic, they are unacquainted and therefore vulnerable to this very potent poison. The creature should expire, and under its own great weight, sink below the ocean.